The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 4 in this special Bliss Business Podcast series, where we're having 5 distinct episodes around how to turn your marketing spend into marketing investments that drive performance. I'm joined today by Josh Preiser, who's the VP of Digital Marketing at Zero Company. So in episode 3, we talked a great deal about measuring your marketing investment, setting up the parameters for how you understand conversion and all the various components that go into that. And then we even talked about attribution. So if you've missed that episode, recommend go back. We talked about the various impact, different levels of attribution, and why it's important to maintain a bottom of the funnel campaign, middle of the funnel campaign, and top of the funnel campaign. And we talked about that in episode 2 as well. Today, we're going to talk about data. Like we left episode 3 with this idea that data is your friend. You can't just make decisions based on gut or how charismatic you are. It doesn't work. The data is your friend in helping you make the right decision. So let's just dig right into it. And the first question is, how do you analyze marketing data to inform investment decisions?
Yeah, no, good question. There's a couple things I'm looking for. Once tracking is set up and I'm confident in the data, then I'm looking for which keywords are generating the lowest cost per conversion. Sometimes refer to that as the lowest CPA, or cost per acquisition. And then obviously I want to push more budget that direction. But I have to say the find that gets me most excited actually is the opposite of that. It's when I can identify poor performing areas of the campaign. And what I'll do is we want to review campaigns. We look for non-performing or low performing keywords and shut those off. So, we have our own internal formulas that we'll use for that. But really, if I can shut off keywords pulling 10% of our budget, then that's just going to push that ad spend toward better performing keywords. It's really the fastest way to improve performance without increasing budget at all. Identify the losers, because there are going to be losers. There's no question. But if you can identify those and shut them off, well, that's going to push budget. If you're analyzing the data, you're going to be able to push budget to what's working. One caveat I'll make to that, and that is it's important to not shut things down until you have statistical significance. And there are calculators out there that kind of help you determine once you've hit that. But, I've seen agencies that say, oh yeah, we shut off. They'll have arbitrary numbers where they'll say, we shut off any keyword that spends or that gets 100 clicks but doesn't have a conversion, or that spends $20 and doesn't have a conversion. And those arbitrary numbers don't make sense to me, because you're not going to have statistical significance. Those numbers need to change depending on what your target cost per conversion is. If my target cost per conversion, if I'm selling something that's $20,000, and my target cost per conversion might be $500, $1,000. So if I'm shutting off a keyword that spent $50 because it didn't convert, I didn't learn anything there. I might be shutting off something that's good. So you definitely want to shut off the losers, but you want to make sure that you have that statistical significance.
It can't be a gut feel. It's got to have data backing it. So let's talk a little bit about what strategies can businesses employ in order to optimize their marketing spend.
Yeah, I would say a big one is making sure that you're, seeing the forest for the trees. You're zoomed out. Yeah, I can't tell you how many clients we get, especially early on. They're nervous. We don't have that relationship yet necessarily, but they'll call us and say, hey, I didn't get any leads yesterday. Okay, well, let me think of it. Like, let's say your budget is $2,000 a month, and we've determined your target cost per lead is $50, and we're just starting out, so we're actually running about $70 a lead right now. We're a little higher until we can bring it down and optimize. So at $70 a lead, if our budget is $2,000 a month, yeah, we should be getting, well, $2,100 would be 30 leads a month. So yeah, we should be getting about 1 lead a day. But statistically, if we have 1 day without a lead, that's not really significant, right? Even 2 days, even 3 days, that's not enough data. So you want to look at larger stretches of data, a week, a month, a quarter, and make sure you don't get into this zone. And sometimes we see this even when we take over accounts. A lot of times we see it when we take over an account that's been managed internally, where we'll look at the change history and we can see just all these kind of knee-jerk decisions that were made with too little data, where it's like, oh, well, this day didn't look good, so I'm going to pull this lever. Oh, and then the next day I'm going to pull this lever. And the next, it's like, oh my goodness, there's too many adjustments have been made. And what will happen is if you make too many adjustments over the course of a couple weeks, it can sometimes take now 6 or 8 weeks for the bidding algorithms to adjust and level out and get back on track. So now instead of 2 weeks of poor results, you have 2 months of poor results before you can get back on track. So it's really important that your agency and that you understand that, hey, this is a process. Don't rush it, because you're going to end up making it take longer. You want to pull a lever, watch what happens, note the results, and then decide, do I pull that lever more? Do I try a different lever or technique?
Yeah, I could see why the data becomes so important. Even we talked about what to measure. It could be time of day, day of week, week of the time of the month, different circumstances that all have statistical value if they're consistent, right? So a good tip there. All right, so what can you give me some examples of how businesses have successfully optimized their marketing investment? Let's talk about some real case examples of how they've optimized based on some of those results, where they were able to pull the right levers based on the right data. And we talked about that. We've heard what happens if you try to kind of play with the algorithms. You might end up actually causing yourself a problem longer than you have to. What's the opposite, where people are like, yeah, I got the data, I did it the right way, and this is the results we got?
Yeah. I was looking back at some other clients, and one example would be a client who sells window coverings. A profitable cost per lead for them, we've determined is anything below 150. And when they first started, we averaged 388 a lead. So not profitable, right? We realized right away, oh, wow, we need to make some major changes to get them down. About 6 months later, we're averaging somewhere between 140 and 170 a lead. So we're getting close. Some months were good. Some months were a little over our target. And then I looked at the long-term data. At the end of their second year, the average cost per lead for that entire year was 112. So very profitable. Now, once you get those you're consistently below your target, and hey, every dollar I'm putting in is generating profit because I'm below my target. Well, now they're starting to increase their ad budget, right? Now don't put your giant ad budget in until you're hitting that cost per acquisition goal consistently. So what they did, I saw that year, is they put in about a 25% increase in their ad budget. They ended up seeing an 89% increase in leads year over year. And by the end of their fourth year, they've seen a 143% increase in lead volume from that start. And then our cost per lead is still well under their goal, sitting at right about 127. So again, it's important to go through those steps. You figure out your tracking, you're confident in your data, you work to get your cost per conversion goal below your target. Once you're consistently there, then you start slowly putting in more and more budget. And again, though, I would never recommend, oh, we're below our goal, let's double our budget. No, that's too aggressive, because too often we see Google's bidding algorithms get too excited and go, oh, look at all this extra money. Let's spend it. And it's no, that's not what we want. We want to slowly increase that budget. So we have definitely scales where we go, okay, let's bump it up by 15%, 20%. Then we watch for 2 or 3 more months. Did we maintain our cost per lead? Yes. Okay, great. Let's bump up a little more. So there's definitely a process to that scale and that growth. But it is the most fun part of the job when you see that that's working and you see that growth.
I heard you say something. This is what I'm translating in my own mind, being a design thinking practitioner. You have to be willing to go through the testing and prototyping phase quite long term. In fact, forever. So one question I have, so if you've got the data, you can make a lot better decisions, right? Technically, if you've got the data and you're not optimizing your marketing, it's likely you're not using it correctly or you're not using it at all. So it's almost impossible to fail if you have the data. But if you're a new business, starting out something new, you may not have the long-term data. So what role does, for example, testing and experimenting play in being successful in optimizing marketing performance investments?
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial. We never stop testing, ever, ever, ever. You know, again, if it's a business that doesn't have a lot of history, then at the very beginning, we're at least establishing a baseline, right? Let's establish a baseline and then work to improve from there. But when it comes to testing, you know, again, there's all these little factors in the sales funnel. And if we can improve even one of them, we get a better return on our investment. So let's say, for example, let's say our cost per conversion is where we want it to be. Well, we want to be improving results with ad split testing. So let's say our ad click-through rate is 2%. 2% of the people that see our ads click on them and come to the website. Now, if we can improve that to 2.5% by split testing ad copy and seeing what resonates better with customers. So we improve that to 2.5%. What does that mean in real world results? Well, the jump from 2 to 2.5% maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a 25% increase in traffic and probably a corresponding 25% increase in conversions. And then there's a second side to that a lot of people don't think about, and that is when we increase our click-through rate, our CTR, we're making Google more money, right? Because more people are clicking on the ads, Google's making more money. So if our ads are outperforming our competitors, Google starts showing our ads higher, even if our competitors have higher bids. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's say, and it happens all the time, honestly, where someone will come reach out to us and say, oh, I've tried pay-per-click. It doesn't work. It's too expensive. Okay. Well, we can see all your competitors are doing it, so they've found a way to make it work. Yeah, I don't know how they can afford it. It's crazy expensive. I don't know how they can afford it. And then you look and you go, oh, their ad copy is way better than what you were running. So, you know, if
Google's favoring them because
100%. And again, it's not altruistic. It's Google's goes, you know, okay, let's say business A has a click-through rate of 2%, and business B has a click-through rate of 4%. Okay, that's a pretty big difference. And business A at 2% is bidding $6 a click. Well, business B at 4% can bid $4 a click. And Google's going to make a lot more money on that $4 click than they will that $6 click because they're going to get twice as many clicks. Right? So
Right.
Google, for every 100 people on business B, is making $8. On business A, for every 100 people, they're only making $6. Guess which business Google's going to put at the top? They're going to put business B at the top. Business B is bidding less than business A, but they're going to show up higher because they've done a good job of ad split testing and making sure that their ads outperform their competitors. So Google's going to reward that. You're going to be up higher, which means even a bigger increase in traffic. So that split testing is critical.
So thank you, Josh. What I'm hearing is it's not just the data that's critical. It's also data tied into testing various campaigns, creatives, or ad copy. because that also contributes to how those ads perform and changes the data itself. That's what's unique about marketing. Is not, you can't just look at the numbers. Oh, the numbers say this, then I should do that, because there is a creative element to it. There's a empathetic element to this as well. So testing is the key thing. And what I'm hearing is it's not significant. Like, you're just trying to get small little increment in conversion.
Yep.
Half a percentage point could be significant, but also helps improve the performance of the overall campaign. So it's got to be managed tightly is what I'm hearing, and ongoing. You can't just kind of leave it and hope it works.
Yeah, absolutely true. And you said something that triggered another thought that is worth bringing up. And that is, if you as a business have ideas for ad copy, share those with the agency, because we definitely have our internal writers. They're going to write ad copy, but the best relationships work with, I always say when we start out with a client, when we're first starting, we should know more about marketing than you do. You should know more about your business than we do. And we need to meld those two knowledge bases, right? And the more successful we are at that, the more successful we're going to be in our campaign. So, if you're on the ground floor and you're talking to your customers, you probably have an idea of what phrases push them closer to a sale, or what phrases push their buttons and are triggers for them. Share that information with your agency so they can incorporate it into the ad copy, because that's, obviously we both want the messaging to be as effective as possible. So if you have ideas for messaging, share those, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And call it out. If it's something that's worked, that's not an experimentation. That is a replica, repeating what's worked. If it's something you want to try new, that is an experiment. Call it out, but because you have to track those things differently so that you don't skew your numbers completely off when you're doing experimentation. Before we go into the last question, we're going to talk about the common pitfalls of marketing optimization and how business can avoid it. I'm hearing loud and clear. How many companies actually go and validate the copy with potential users or buyers before they actually go ahead and turn the investment machine on? Is that being done enough, you think?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. That's actually an interesting idea. That probably should be done more of getting feedback from customers and consumers on what is the messaging that means the most to them. So that's actually an excellent point.
I think actually a platform like the one that Xero just introduced, AI CMO, not that this is a shameless plug, but it is actually appropriate, because you can actually do empathetic copy and then test those. You can use AI to actually help based on parameters of what your customers are interested in and what they care about, where you can test different copies based on empathetic principles, which could land very differently. But I don't think it's being done enough. There's some who do user groups and they'll test and see how you feel about this. But I think there's definitely an opportunity to do more of that. So let's go into the final question of this segment here. What are some of the common pitfalls in marketing optimization, and how can businesses avoid them? Let's talk about the don't do this list.
Yeah, I think we touched on it briefly, but I think the biggest mistake you can make is kind of knee-jerk reactions, acting on data that isn't statistically significant, from too small of a time span. You definitely want to let the data develop enough to tell the story, and sometimes no decision is the best decision. Let things play out a little bit. But another pitfall I see all the time that drives me bonkers is being overly aggressive with your target cost per conversion. Because if your target cost per conversion is too low, you'll end up turning off keywords that are actually profitable for you. So, let's go back to that window treatment client. We talked about a profitable cost per lead for them was $150. Sometimes we'll see a client think, well, if I tell my agency $150, they'll never try to get it lower than that. So I'm going to tell them $130. Okay. Well, we've got a number of issues there. The first one is trust, right? If we don't have that relationship of trust, we're going to have issues. But now, let's say we're working with that $130 number. But now, once we have enough data, we're going to start turning off keywords that cost us 140 a lead. Those are profitable keywords, but you're never going to get those leads. They're going to go to your competitors because you're overly aggressive with your target cost per conversion. So you want to set a goal that is profitable but reasonable, because if you get overly aggressive, that's really going to limit your growth.
So be in partnership with your marketing agency. Be in partnership, if you're the owner of a business, with your head of marketing. Don't try to push something that hasn't been proven before because your gut tells you we should be able to achieve this and there's no data behind it. Get to the data together and get to it transparently so that you actually make decisions that are smart business decisions, not some gut feeling. And the other thing is, if you had a dream about some ad copy you think was going to be huge, but there's no data behind it, please don't push that. Don't push that idea. That's a sure way. If you want to experiment, set a budget to experiment. But
yeah, you can always test. I would say though that there are times when clients have brought me ad copy ideas, and I go, that's never going to work. Oh, but we'll test it, and it works great. So yeah. Don't be afraid to test.
Just don't swap everything else out for that idea.
Don't put everything there, but you, like you said, set aside some budget for testing.
All right, very good. So when it comes to optimizing your marketing spend, you do have to manage the data tightly, and you've got to have enough of it where it's statistically valuable, and also be willing to experiment and test different things, and take that input over a period of time, not over a day or a week, over a period of time. So now you have a new set of data that can help you make informed decisions. It's blending creative with science. That's really what it is. It's the art and science coming together, but the science plays the key role on how you spend and optimize your investment. So that's a key thing we've learned from this episode. Tune in again for our final number 5 episode in the series, where we're talking about future-proofing your marketing investment strategy. Beyond the horizon, future-proofing your marketing investment. Let's talk about that in the next episode. Until then, stay well.